just like the moonraker goes in search of his dream of gold. I search for love, for someone to have and hold. I've seen your smile in a thousand dreams, felt your touch.
Well, that was the opening music to Moonraker, the 1979 James Bond movie starring Roger Moore. And this is the fourth Bond movie that we have watched for this Bond festival. And you're listening to Classic Movie Reviews, and you can find us on the internet at www.classicmoviereviews.net, and on Patreon, just go to patreon.com/classicmoviereviews. And I'm Matt Johnson, coming to you from rainy North Bend.
And this is Bob Johnson in Los Angeles, welcoming everybody back to Classic Movie Reviews and Moonraker from 1979, the height of the James Bond, Roger Moore movies.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole thing peaked at Moonraker. Yeah, it's all downhill after this.
This film came out in June of 1979. I don't think I saw it when it first came out because of scheduling and all that I had going on, but I did see it within 6 months of its release. It truly is a blend of Bond, science fiction, and fantasy.
And superhero movies.
And all wrapped into one that takes place in just a little over 2 hours.
Yeah, they pack a lot into 2 hours, man. It feels like a couple different movies in one.
You know, I went through the list of all the Bond movies. There's no way they've even ever come close to losing money on any of these films. This one, in adjusted dollars, is now grossing up close to $600 million if you adjust it to current values. I mean, these will be made for the next 100 years if they keep having return like that.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah, this was I was saying before we got started that I feel like this is the peak of 1970s sci-fi. You know, it kind of falls into the realm of like Logan's Run and Westworld, and it has some of the same feel to it as those movies in the set designs and some of the special effects, but it's just like they perfected all of that, and it all came together in Moonraker for me.
No kidding. And shortly there was a transition in 1979 to a more graphic kind of science fiction movie, because that was the year Alien came out.
Yeah, this is definitely the tail end of that 70s sci-fi aesthetic, and then we start getting into things like Alien and Blade Runner and Empire Strikes Back, and they have a very different feel than these movies from the 70s. Oh, you remember that movie? I really like this movie too, called Looker.
Oh,
where that guy,
yes, with
Albert Finney.
Albert Finney and this weapon. I don't remember. We went to see that in Seattle.
Yeah, the weapon where you flashes a light and it makes you like forget what happened, and it kind of puts you into like a stupor. And yeah, that was kind of a blend of 70s and 80s sci-fi, but that's another one that we should take a look at.
I'd forgotten about that one. Yeah, he didn't make too many science fiction movies. So, well, this one is the 11th of the Bond films and Roger Moore's fourth. And our director, it's the first time he directed one of these films. He did two other Bond films. He did, this was not the first one he did.
This was the third and final film that he directed.
He did You Only Live Twice, and then he did The Spy Who Loved Me, and then Moonraker. So yes, this was his last film. And he directed about 40 films, and one of my favorites that he did from 1966 with Michael Caine is Alfie.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that one.
It's a really, really in-depth look at a guy that you learn more about than you might ever care to learn about. It's a good movie. Alfie, 1966. But then after this, I was going to say after this film, then the next, I think 4 or 5 films were all directed by John Glenn, who did the editing for this one. So they must have liked what he did.
Yeah. Yeah, this was well edited for sure. And I thought it was well directed too. And Roger Moore is just perfect as Bond in this movie.
He's got more one-liners.
He does. And I love that sometimes he just cocks an eyebrow, kind of like, I don't know, he's sort of like surprised and then yet not surprised at the same time. It's kind of like when he walks into that lair in the Amazon and then all these women come out of these different areas around this pool of water that's in the middle, and he just kind of gets this look on his face like, okay, party time.
I didn't count them, but he did that at least a half a dozen times in the film. There'll be a new situation, and he gives it a look like, oh, I can handle this.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to matter what or where.
Yeah, he's just like ready to go. And, he's battling kendo fighters in a glass shop in Italy. He's battling a boa constrictor in a underground lair in the Amazon. He's racing through Venice on a boat that it's, what is it, one of those gondolas that has a motor in it that turns into like a car or like a hovercraft. It's just so crazy.
He goes through the biggest square in Venice, packed with people.
I laughed so hard when he was driving through that square, and then the look on the pedestrians and the bystanders' faces, and the waiter is like pouring wine, but then
even the dog. There was even a dog that gave him a look. Let's not forget either that he went out of an airplane without a parachute, and then catches up, and then Jaws comes flying over to greet him, and then there's the one where he's being chased in the Amazon with a boat that he then just happens to have a one of those flying, what do you call it?
Like a glider. Like
glider,
a hang glider.
There's that. I mean,
they dialed it up to an 11 in this movie. The gadgets are so out of control and so ridiculous, and we've got a laser space battle at the end, and
I know.
And how many space shuttles do they have? They've got 6 that Drax has built, and then the Americans send one up, and I felt like they had more on standby just in case they needed them. It's definitely like some unspecified future time when they have the technology to build this giant spaceship and space station where they're gonna have it's like a Noah's Ark kind of a thing, but in an evil way, because Drax is he's probably one of the most villainous Bond characters in my mind, because he wants to commit genocide against the entire human race. How much worse can you get?
What exactly are you up to here, Drax? And why the orchids?
The curse of a civilization. It was neither war nor pestilence that wiped out the race who built the great city lying around us. It was their reverence for this lovely flower.
Because long-term exposure to its pollen caused sterility.
Correct, Mr. Bond. As you discovered, I have improved upon sterility. Those same seeds now yield death. Not, of course, to animals or plant life. One must preserve the balance of nature.
I know. And not only that, but he's hand-selected all of those couples that would go live on the space station and have children so they could repopulate the Earth with the Drax formulated people. I mean,
that speech that he gives on the space station at the end, that was... The thing about the movie, though, is like that speech is chilling. It's like this movie alternates between just ridiculous stuff like jumping out of the plane without a parachute and the hang glider over the waterfall, but then you get like these speeches on the space station. It's like, whoa, that's terrifying. The guy is like absolutely insane.
First, there was a dream. Now there is reality. Here, in the untainted cradle of the heavens, will be created a new super race, a race of perfect physical specimens. You have been selected as its progenitors. Like gods, your offspring will return to Earth and shape it in their image. You have all served in humble capacities in my terrestrial empire. Your seed, like yourselves, will pay deference to the ultimate dynasty which I alone have created. From their first day on Earth, they will be able to look up and know that there is law and order in the heavens.
Well, you know, if this were done as a straight drama, it would be an entirely different movie. Because the whole premise of it is, like you say, the genocide of an entire world population by one man.
The reason I love this movie so much is that it is kind of tongue in cheek, but then there's this undercurrent of scary sci-fi dystopia, world-ending kind of stuff going on, which is kind of funny to think about in a movie that has all this craziness going on. I mean, that opening scene, I remember seeing this in the theater, and I was like, my jaw dropped when they did that scene, jumping out of the plane without parachutes, and Bond is like flying through the air, and it really looks like that's Roger Moore. I mean, know. The body doubles are so good. Yeah.
I noticed that too, when he's fighting the fight in the expensive museum with all that glassware. That looks like Roger Moore the whole time.
Yeah.
The stunt double. I don't know if at that time they had the ability to modify a person's appearance on film. I doubt it.
No way.
No.
But
it's got, even the opening, you know, here the space shuttle is flying along, and so Drax is short one of the space shuttles that wasn't functioning right, so he just hijacks the one that's on the back of the plane that's going to the United Kingdom.
Yeah, which is
the short one.
You definitely have to suspend disbelief in this movie, because why would you put a space shuttle on the back of a 747 that is full of fuel? Like, why would you not just empty out the fuel tanks before you fly it across the Atlantic? But no, the space shuttle is like totally fueled and ready to take off the back of the 747.
Another scene near the beginning when Bond enters onto the scene and is on the trail of what's going on, and he ends up going out to China Lake, where there's an enormous amount of military facilities and hardware run by both the Air Force and Navy. And Drax has his entire manufacturing facility out there in the middle of the high desert. But off in the distance, you see this beautiful French countryside place that he's built out in the middle of the desert. And then we switch to that, which is actually in France. And it's like, wow, this is quite an environmental challenge and accomplishment to put that together.
Well, you think about all the water it would take to build that. And the matte paintings in this movie are really good, because you know that's definitely a matte painting of, because you're up in an aerial view, and then you look out and you see like this lush green area with this giant French style mansion. And then he's as he's like sneaking around the mansion at night, and No, it wasn't Dr. Goodhead. It was the pilot, the airplane pilot.
It was the helicopter pilot.
The helicopter pilot was helping him find out where the safe was, and then he opens the safe and takes some pictures with this tiny little camera, and right on the front of the camera, over the lens, it says 007.
Yeah, I know.
He's got a personalized spy camera.
He's probably got that 007 even on his automatic weapons.
Yeah.
Drax's personal pilot is Corinne. Her character's name is Corinne Dufour, and her first name in real life is Corinne Clary, I think it is. But you know, Drax doesn't suffer long for the bad performance of his subordinates.
Well, and that's another example. Like that scene where the dogs chase her down in the forest is another like terrifying scene, and the music.
Yeah.
The music changes, and it becomes almost like this horror scene.
You called for me, Mr. Drax?
You were with Bond last night in my study.
No,
You showed him the safe.
I didn't.
I'm terminating your employment. You will leave immediately.
She's running for her life, and she's, she's not going to make it, and these dogs are chasing her, and yeah, that was really well done. So again, this movie kind of like vacillates between ridiculousness and like scary stuff that's going on.
I also, before we started recording, I mentioned that I have to take my mind back to 1979 to get into the background and environment of this film, and some of the names that the characters have, and some of the characters, how they're portrayed.
Yeah.
And then Michael Lonsdale plays Drax, and he's one of my favorite actors. He just in the Day of the Jackal, he was so good as the inspector that he was Claude Lebel in Day of the Jackal, tracking down this killer assassin. And then in The Bride Wore Black, he's one of the victims of the bride.
Oh gosh, I wish we could watch that movie. We got to find that movie.
It'll show up somehow.
Yeah.
It will. I'm hoping that it will show up on one of the new streaming services that has some of the other films that we've watched, like Jim and Jules is on that.
Yeah, like HBO Max or something.
Yeah, HBO Max, something like that. But he's done so many different characters. He's even a sort of a secretive spy that paints small models in Ronin, the Robert De Niro film from 1990.
Oh, really? My gosh.
Way into that film, De Niro gets injured and shot, and they take him to Michael Lansdale's lair, and Lansdale is painting all these miniatures, and is kind of a philosophical person. You're never quite sure what his role is, but he's also in the same kind of role in Munich. The man, I don't know how many films he did, but he was working all the time.
He was awesome. He's definitely one of my favorite Bond villains, and he's got some just amazing speeches, like the one on the space station that is so chilling, and then these little like throwaway things that he says, like when Bond is attacked by the boa constrictor and then kills it with that needle dart, the poisonous needle thing that is in his pen, and then he gets dragged out by Jaws, and then Drax comes in and says,
Mr. Bond, you defy all my attempts to plan an amusing death for you. You're not a sportsman, Mr. Bond. Why did you break off the encounter with my pet python?
I discovered he had a crush on me.
Jaws.
Yep.
and it's just hilarious. Yeah.
He's both hilarious and totally evil.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
just the epitome of a narcissistic scientist.
He's got another one right after that where Bond is like he's doing the classic Bond villain thing where he explains his plan to Bond, and Bond is standing there dripping wet because he just got dragged out of the pool with the boa constrictor, and then Drax looks at Jaws and says, Bond must be a bit chilly after his swim. Why don't you take him someplace where he will be guaranteed to be warm? And he says it with a completely straight face, but it's just hilarious the way he delivers that line.
He is one of the better Bond villains. More memorable to me.
Yeah, definitely.
And then we mustn't forget Jaws.
Oh man, he's great.
He was in 2 Bond films.
Yeah, the one right before this, right? And then this one.
Let's see, the one right before it.
The Spy Who Loved Me? Is that
he was in that, yeah. And then he was in this one. And I remember him, he was in a film from 1974 called The Longest Yard with Burt Reynolds.
Oh, yeah, he was one of the inmates, right?
Yeah. Apparently, in real life, he was really a good author and wrote poetry as well.
Oh, that's cool.
He's a huge man.
Well, this is his character is why I think this movie is also a superhero movie, because there's that scene when they're in Rio de Janeiro and they're up on the mountain, and Bond and Dr. Goodhead are going to come down off the mountain in the gondola, and then Jaws grabs the steel cable and puts it between his teeth and bites down on it and breaks the steel cable with his teeth.
Yeah. That's not easy to do.
And then a little bit later, he's on top of the gondola, next to the gondola where Bond and Dr. Goodhead are, and he just sort of casually jumps from one to the other like it's no big deal. And I mean, that's like superhero stuff, right? Like that's not
Oh, yeah.
humanly
Oh, yeah.
possible. None of that is humanly possible. So yeah.
There was a lot of superhero stuff going on when they get to the last part of the movie on the space station.
Oh, definitely. Well, and that's even more like science fiction stuff too, like
Yeah,
the
that's
laser
true.
guns and the battle in space I laughed so hard when the Americans are sending up the space shuttle and Drax is like, deploy the laser cannon, and Bond looks at Dr. Goodhead like, uh-oh, what we got to stop this, and they figure out that how they can cause the jets to fire that are going to reverse the spin of the space station, and then everybody goes flying through the space station and like hits the wall, and the gravity stops and everybody starts floating around, and it's just again kind of ridiculous and funny, but it serves the plot.
Well, and then he and Dr. Goodhead take off after the three evil containers that had been ejected out over the Earth. And
Yeah.
they're successful in catching up with all of them. I mean, it's
And
There's
it's like a
just about
video game.
everything in
He's
this.
like he's crouched over the laser cannon that's mounted in the space shuttle, and they're flying through the atmosphere, and the bottom of the space shuttle is heating up, and fire's going everywhere, and he just gets the shot off at the last second.
It's getting hot.
Can't be helped. I'm coming in at a steeper angle than I should in order to catch that last glow. I can't hold this course much longer. We'll break up at 200,000 feet.
Just a few seconds more. Automatic firing system negative. Must be the heat. Switching to manual.
Controls aren't responding. Wings are beginning to glow.
Hold her steady. Steady.
It's entering the Earth's atmosphere. James, this is our last chance.
Steady.
And destroys the canister. But right before that, another thing I really like about this movie is the arc that Jaws goes through, because at the beginning he's basically like a monster, like an evil monster, almost like a Frankenstein's monster, and by the end of it he's met this woman and fallen in love and decides to turn on Drax and fight for the good fight with Bond, and then sacrifices himself with his love interest at the end.
But he and his girlfriend get in that escape pod, and I remember a line near the end of the movie where this guy is coming over the radio saying that they found two people.
They need to do a Jaws spin-off movie with him and his love interest.
I love the look on his face when he finally realized that he was not going to be chosen by Drax to be one of these people to repopulate the Earth. Because another scene that just cracked me up, they show all these couples on this each space shuttle, and I swear they all look like they've been hypnotized, and they're just. It just doesn't.
It looks
look
like
real.
they just found all these people on the beach in Southern California. You know, they're like a bunch of surfer people.
And they all look like clones of one another, and they're all going to. So there's 6 shuttles, and I figured there were probably 40 people per shuttle. So he was going to put like, say, 200 to 300 people or more on this space station thing, and have them have children, and then they were going to all come back to the Earth. And I'm like, this is really, this guy is beyond being a nut job.
But he almost got away with it too. Like, he actually built the space station and had all these shuttles and all these people, and man, Bond got there just in time. I laughed again too when they're at the Amazon base, under the Inca temple, I think, and Bond and Dr. Goodhead are realizing that they need to get on one of the space shuttles, so they just knock out a couple drivers of one of these little electric vehicles, and then they just casually walk onto the space shuttle and get into the captain's chairs.
Yeah.
Like,
And
it's
off
no
they
big
go.
deal. Nobody checks their credentials or anything. It's just like, okay, we're going to go to space now. It all happens within about 30 seconds.
They had a serious breakdown in security.
Yeah.
The mad scientist part of Drax reminds me of Claude Rains, the mad scientist in The Invisible Man, when he just
Yeah.
becomes possessed by what he wants to do, and Drax is just totally possessed. And even the one-liner as Bond sends him out into space.
At least I shall have the pleasure of putting you out of my misery. Desolated Mr. Bond.
Heartbroken, Mr. Drax. Allow me. Take a giant step for mankind.
It's a good one.
I just, there's so many, this movie takes us all over the globe. We're flying over the Atlantic.
Well, we fly over the Atlantic. Then we're with Bond on this private jet, and I don't know where they are. Someplace in like southwest United States, I think. And then everybody on the plane turns on him. Like, I don't know what he was doing or who these people were, but they all try to kill him. And then Jaws is on the plane too, and they jump out of the plane without a parachute. Well, Bond does. Well, is he thrown out of the plane? I think Jaws throws him out of the plane.
I think Jaws pushes him out, I think.
Yeah. But then he, of course, is able to survive that by taking a parachute off the pilot. And then Jaws his parachute doesn't work, and then he just lands on a giant circus tent and survives.
Yeah, I thought that was a superhero.
Yeah, for sure. And then we go back to headquarters for MI6, and we see Miss Moneypenny, and it's the classic. He walks in, throws his hat on the hat stand, the coat stand, and has some quips with Miss Moneypenny, and then we're with M, and it's just like, okay, this is the Bond formula. There's like some crazy opening, and then we go meet with M, and Q gives him some cool gadgets, and then he's off on his mission. And they've really got the formula down at this point.
Yeah, and then he ends up in California, and then they're in Europe, and then he ends up in Brazil, and then in space.
And then the Amazon. No, don't forget, he goes to the Amazon.
Oh, yeah, it goes to the Amazon.
They go to the Rio Carnival. Remember that carnival scene where Jaws is like gonna bite into, was it Dr. Good? No, it was another Bond woman.
It was another agent.
Yeah.
I forget her name, but Bond.
Bond again encounters Goodhead in Venice. Let's see, and then Bond finds evidence that Drax is moving his operation to Rio de Janeiro, and then he meets up with Dr. Goodhead in Rio. But this article doesn't have who that agent was that almost got her neck ripped out by Jaws. That was crazy. And it's always so funny when Bond and Jaws encounter each other. Bond is always like trying to punch him in the stomach or kick him between the legs, and there's always this metallic clanging sound. Like Jaws is like some kind of a robot or something.
You know, as I step back from the film and I'm thinking about the people that made this and the storyboards for it and all of the matte paintings and the special effects, it was a miracle that they got it all pulled off. It had a huge budget. It went way over its budget, but then it recouped that in about the first night of opening.
34 million was twice as much as the movie before it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see why, because of all the special effects. And then having that all hang together in a movie of any kind is a creative, a masterpiece in that sense. Just the technical part of it.
It is kind of a miracle this movie was made. I mean, it's so over the top, and you know, I think in some ways it sort of pushed the limit almost too far, and there was sort of a backlash against how far things were going with Bond, and there was a movement, I think, in later Bond movies to bring it a little bit more into like the realm of reality and not have it be quite so much of a superhero film.
I agree.
But in some ways, I feel like some of the later Daniel Craig movies are going more in this direction of just pushing things to like ridiculous heights, and he definitely feels more like a superhero in the opening. I mentioned this in another episode, but the opening scene to Spectre, where this huge amount of this city is destroyed, and he's able to navigate all of that destruction and is running along a building while it's collapsing and ends up sitting in a couch, you know, that happened to be sitting there in this alleyway as the buildings crash down around him. And it's like, yeah, I mean, that's like superhero stuff.
It is. I'm trying to I think some of the early Bond films with Sean Connery were more like a spy thriller, like From Russia with Love. That makes it a favorite of mine.
Definitely.
And then in the middle part, I've sort of lost track of who it was. It may have been Timothy Dalton's character. It's a little bit more spy movie oriented, not quite as many special effects. But it goes back and forth.
Yeah, because then I'm thinking about the movies with Pierce Brosnan. And there was some crazy stuff in those movies.
Oh,
too.
yes.
Like, they really pushed the gadgets and they really pushed the supercars and the crazy stunts in those movies. And so, yeah, maybe it kind of it goes through the cycle where it's like, well, how far can we push it and how crazy can we get? And then, oh, maybe that's a little too far. Let's dial it back. Yeah.
Just to be one of the directors for this film would be both a huge blessing and a nightmare to try to pull it off. Gosh, I guess managing all this.
Yeah, it feels like threading a needle. You've really got to balance a lot of things. I feel like you could go one way or the other too far and have it turn out to be not good. I mean, because there are some Bond movies that are not as good as others. When we recorded the bonus episode for Patreon where we were talking about Bond, you and I couldn't remember if it was like that he likes his martini shaken, not stirred, or stirred, not shaken. And
yes,
there's a YouTube video that has every single Bond movie where he says shaken, not stirred. And it goes on for like 2.5 minutes.
Gosh.
Kind of interesting to watch how the visuals changed through the movies and how the different actors delivered that line. And how it kind of just became such an integral part of his character to have that drink, and you just expect him to say that at some point during the movie.
There's so much in this film to try to put it into a linear plot. We'd need another hour because it's just all over the globe. I did read that I think in the late 70s, Steven Spielberg offered to direct a film after he'd finished Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and I never could really find out much about what happened to that.
Oh, wow, that would have been interesting.
He went on to his own huge successes with Indiana Jones and so forth. But
if you think about Indiana Jones in some ways, I mean, it kind of owes some debt to James Bond. I think that it may be a little bit more to the serials of the 1930s,
even the 1930s series.
Well,
serials.
30s, yeah.
Let's see, who have we forgotten that's memorable in this film? We've got the usual characters for M and Q and Miss Moneypenny. I thought that Dr. Goodhead was a character that was played well by Lois Childs. She did a lot of films and TV work in these kinds of roles, or they were sort of second line.
Yeah, another thing I like about this movie is that it sort of recognizes how, in some ways, misogynistic Bond can be.
Oh,
there's a scene
yes.
there's a scene in Venice where they're standing over a bridge, and he's saying something kind of misogynistic, and then she basically shuts him down so fast.
Dr. Goodhead.
I can only hope your presence here is a coincidence, Mr. Bond. I dislike being spied on.
Oh, don't we all? You're staying at the Daniele, aren't you?
Yes. How did you know?
Well, I'd like to keep abreast of things. May I ask what you're doing in Venice?
I'm addressing a seminar of the European Space Commission.
Well, heady stuff. But there again, I keep forgetting that you are more than just a very beautiful woman.
If you're trying to be ingratiating, Mr. Bond, don't bother. I have more important things on my mind.
Ah, that's what I'd like to talk to you about. Dinner this evening?
This evening I'm giving my address.
But then can you think of a reason why we don't have a drink afterwards?
Not immediately, but I'm sure I shall.
And there's another scene when they first meet where Bond says, "Well, I didn't expect you to be a woman," and she has a great comeback to that.
You'll find Dr. Goodhead first on the right.
Oh, thank you for the ride.
Call on me if you need anything.
Good afternoon.
Can I help you?
Yes, my name is Bond. James Bond. I'm looking for Dr. Goodhead.
You just found her.
A woman?
Your powers of observation do you credit, Mr. Bond.
James. To my friends.
Holly Goodhead.
Are you training to be an astronaut?
I'm fully trained. On loan from NASA, the Space Administration. Well, Mr. Bond, I guess we'd better get started. You don't want to lose time as well as the space shuttle, do you?
It's such a sign of the times. In 1979, I feel like his reaction is pretty realistic. Yeah.
It makes it hard for me to watch it in 2021 and put my mind back in that time period, but I did it reasonably well.
It makes it easier because she doesn't put up with that crap, you know. Like she's a good, strong character, and she knows her value, and she knows that she's just as smart or smarter than all these guys that are around her, and she knows how to fly a space shuttle. She's the one who's able to like dock the space shuttle on the space station, and she fights with laser guns at the end, just like all these guys, and so I really, really liked her character.
I did have a slightly different question. Like when he fights in that museum of beautiful glassware that they destroy all this stuff. Then the M comes back with the Ministry of Defense guy the next day, and it's all completely redone. Isn't that the same building?
It's the same room. And it's like,
and Drax
I guess he's got like a super cleanup crew that comes in and like picks all that stuff up and rebuilds the walls. And fortunately, Bond had snuck into that factory and stole some of the nerve gas earlier and sends it off to M. And M's like, "Oh yeah, this stuff is bad news. We got to stop this."
So I was struck by how efficient Drax could be at some things and how poorly he did security.
Was he even in Venice before that? How did he get to Venice so quick?
No, I don't think so. He just shows up. Well, you could get there by jet, but he had to have hundreds of people redoing that, and they took full use of it. Let me tell you, I give the movie, I think, about an 8. I go back and some of it's like a 3 or a 4, and some of it's a 10. The highlight for me is it was that fight in the Glass Museum. That was so well done. I couldn't tell it. I could not tell if it was a stunt double or Roger Moore.
Yeah, there's so many great scenes in this movie. It's hard to pick one that's my favorite. But I think the last 15 minutes when they're in space and they have the big space battle is really memorable for me. And I love the aesthetic of the Amazon base. It's so 1970s sci-fi, but with a really big budget. You know, it's like they had all the money in the world. How can they really make this look cool? And they really did. So I was kind of landing on an 8 because there's parts of it that are, like you said, not great, but there's some that are just outstanding.
Well, while we were doing the ratings, I was thinking they covered every genre of film except for a Western. And then I said, no, wait a minute. He shows up and he's riding a horse and he's dressed as a gaucho.
That's right. He does.
I'd forgotten about that.
Western.
So they cover that. Musical? Is there any musical numbers in it of any kind? I don't think there is.
I don't think anybody.
That might have been the one genre that they decided. Well,
maybe
we can't
maybe
do a
that
musical.
scene hit the cutting floor. You know, they filmed it and they said, well, having all of these guys and women in space singing, maybe they could have been singing on the space shuttle on the way of like Kumbaya or something.
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
those clone people in the.
Yeah.
Didn't you find them? I mean, they all look the same.
I did appreciate that they weren't all white though. There was some black people and there was some, I think some Asian people in there. So, but they were mostly white, of course.
But they just, I tell you,
yeah,
he had a quite a vision of the future. Jeez.
It was a Nazi genocide sort of Aryan race vision of the future where he wanted to just start over the entire Earth population with these select group of people that he'd handpicked. Yeah, it's just
That's
crazy
it.
when you think about
That's
that.
it.
You know, like that's the crux of the plot, and that's just insane.
Well, should I mention our upcoming podcasts?
Yeah, well, if we can get ourselves straightened away on what those are.
Well, it helped that I wrote it down and then I found my list.
Okay, good.
My memory of it was all mixed up. So our next podcast is scheduled to be A Touch of Evil, made in 1958 and then redone as a director's cut long after Orson Welles had died, and redone in 1998. So we hope that's the one that we're able to review. And then we're going to do Crossfire from 1947, which is an excellent statement about anti-Semitism and murder. And then Paths of Glory from 1957, a Stanley Kubrick masterpiece with Kirk Douglas about World War I and some serious missteps that were carried out in that era. And then The Spiral Staircase from 1946. And we picked The Spiral Staircase from 1946 because it's directed by Robert Siodmak, who came to the U.S. from the Weimar Republic era of Germany to escape the German Nazi movement. And he had a long and successful career in the U.S., and this is one of his first films. He may have also done Crossfire. I can't remember. I think that was Edward Dmytryk. But anyway, those are upcoming films. Then we have to move into some musicals and westerns.
Maybe some comedies or something.
Except something a little lighter.
Although this
There's
was
plenty
kind
of
of comedy, I would say. So,
yeah, no kidding. Wow.
when you do our tally of like movies and what categories and genres, you're gonna have a hard time with this one. Is it science fiction? Is it fantasy? Is it comedy? Is it all of those?
Maybe I should just count it one time for each category.
Yeah, it's kind of a
Imagine
unicorn.
that. Imagine this film that we just reviewed in the hands of Mel Brooks.
Oh, you
Wouldn't
mean
that be
Spaceballs?
No, well, I was thinking of.
Didn't he do Spaceballs?
Moonraker directed. Yeah, he did Spaceballs. Yes, yes. He would have had a field day with Moonraker.
Mel Brooks should have done a Bond send up. That would have been great.
Done what? You broke up on me.
Mel Brooks should have done a Bond send up movie. You know, like a spoof.
Yes, like he did with Spaceballs.
Yeah, totally.
He just ran out of time, I guess.
Okay. Well, that was our review of Moonraker. It's a fun movie with lots of flaws, but also lots of things that recommend it. And coming to you from North Bend, this is Matt.
And here in Los Angeles, Bob, hoping everybody has happy movie watching.
James.
I think it may be time to go home.
Take me around the world one more time.
Why not?
Where